Yo, yo, yo. Hey, guys, welcome back to another awesome edition of the Best Practices Show podcast. One of the most embarrassing things that could ever happen to you in running a dental practice is the E word. It's called embezzlement. Nobody likes to talk about it. It's not fun when it happens, and yet it's important to be educated about it. Today, we have a great member from the ACT dental community, Dr. Stacey Hall, who shares her journey through this and what she learned and what she recommends going forward so you don't experience it also. So please listen up. It's a great episode. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you soon. Hey guys, welcome back to the Best Practices Show podcast. You know the jam. I say that all the time, but you guys do know the jam if you're listening. Our job is to find the best thinkers, leaders, teachers, dentists anywhere in the country and learn from them and pass along that learning to you in this podcast so you can create a better practice and a better life. And no one likes to talk about the E word in dentistry. It's called embezzlement. It's painful, emotionally, financially, from a trust standpoint. There's a lot of things that happen when it happens to you, and you never think it's ever going to happen to you. And today, I have an amazing dentist that is a great member of the ACT dental community, Dr. Stacey Hall, and she's going to take us through her journey of embezzlement and what she learned the hard way and what she's doing different. Stacey, thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me. I totally appreciate it.
Yeah. And I've watched your journey for a long time through the Dawson Academy, through building an amazing practice. And I don't know, let's just start here. I want people to know, who you are. I have a lot of young listeners now in dental school. Let's start here with just a little bio on who you are, where you practice, and then let's go into your journey.
I'm Stacey Hall. I'm from Williamsburg, Virginia. I went to Virginia Tech, go Hokies, and I went to MCV, or Virginia Commonwealth University, for dental school. And I was in a group practice for 9 years in the Williamsburg area. And then I started my practice in 2011 as a startup. And it has been an amazing journey. I have 3 girls. One just started college down in Tampa, which is great because when I go down and teach at the Dawson Academy, I can go visit her as well. And then I have 2 high schoolers. And so that's a little bit about me. Yeah.
And you and I were talking, we had a call, and you were explaining, gosh, I've been doing this and I just had something happen. And you shared, I'm like, we got to do a podcast on this. And when we talked about this before we hit the go button, we're going to go through 3 points of this. So if you're listening, we're going to start with the background, and then, what happened after you found out and what you're doing now. So give us the background on it, Stacey, like before and what was going on.
To my knowledge, I have never had anybody embezzle from me. I have always done checks and balances, checks with, what we were supposed to collect, what was being deposited, and that sort of thing. And so I had a patient that actually came to me and said that she thought somebody was stealing from me. And it was very cut and dry. It wasn't like she could think it. It was like from what she presented, we knew. And it was actually, I think, more surprising because I and my whole team would have never thought this one person would have ever done it. And so ended up that the patient came to me and said that she was told that if she wrote a check, that it would be stamped with the business name. And instead, she went back and checked her checks, and it was written to this employee's name. I'll just call her Sarah. So it was written to Sarah and endorsed to Sarah and also deposited into Sarah's account. And so what I recognized is it was a large check. It was for an Invisalign case. And so what I did is I went back to those Invisalign cases, or not all of our Invisalign cases, and just said, is she targeting those individuals? Like, what is she targeting? And so things started to kind of look a little funny in some accounts. And I thought, okay, well, let's, look a little bit more, and found that there were some adjustments, but then there were some appointments that just, we knew the patient had come in and the ledger was cleared out. So, I, in fact, took this to, I did sell my practice. I didn't include that. I did sell my practice right after COVID to Heartland. And to be honest with you, just in the growth in the last couple of years, that's been great. And training for my staff, that's been wonderful. But I literally found out about this on June 30th. I was leaving on July 5th for Italy with my daughter who had just graduated from high school. And I would have probably had to cancel my trip hadn't I not been able to hand this information over and just say, I need you to do something with this. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to call. I know to maybe call James City County Police. I don't know. So they just took over the information and started doing some more combing. And then also what was really great is they could take me through just the legal way to put her on suspension, and then the legal way to let go of her, and the legal way to handle things so that there was nothing that could come back on me or the practice in any way, so that we could just, this could be very clean and cut and dry. That was the start of the process of us just finding out and getting enough information to at least put her on suspension.
Yeah. Go back to the moment where you were first introduced the idea. Can you speak to the emotion of it? Because it's bigger than a lot of us could get our arms around. You know,
Absolutely.
I hear things that are something like, your first thought is, no way, not her, not Sarah. Come on. Your second thought is, oh gosh, like this is, ooh, do I even go there? Do I not go there? How do I go there? Can you just speak about that moment in time and what was going on?
And you're right, Kirk, because that right first you're like, there's no way. But then the information she was providing, again, it was just so just right there. I mean, and I just asked her, because she didn't have the check with her. I just asked her, I said, can you send me an email with a dialogue of what she said she was going to do to the check and that sort of thing, and also send me a copy of the check. And she said, no problem. The thing is during that conversation, you still think, okay, how did this happen? And then, has it happened before? But you're also like, well, certainly there has to be something in her life that made her do this for like just a moment. There's just a moment that she's doing this. This was something that, just happened, that maybe she owed some money. I don't know. So I automatically go into this kind of compassionate, like there had to have been something that happened that made her do this. Like this couldn't be a long-term thing, because we certainly would have caught it. So I think, you kind of go in this wave of, and then after the patient left and I start kind of digging, then I'm starting to get angry. I'm angry at myself, and I'm angry at a person doing this. I'm angry at the fact that she's done this to a patient, and then the patient trusted us to hire somebody that wouldn't do this. And then that also the patient's trust that we're also doing checks and balances. You start to go into this whole spiral. I mean, there's even my front office ladies, as they start to learn what was going on, they start to feel angry. Like, how did that happen around them? Or how did they never feel or get a sense that something like this was happening, or that she would be able to do that? So I have pretty good intuition, and this one completely bamboozled me. I did not see this coming whatsoever. So I felt pretty lost.
Yeah. And I always want to point this out. This is a tough subject. And please, like, our goal with this podcast is not to make you mistrust everyone and go in and dislike your team members and start, micromanaging everything. The point in doing this is just to tell stories, real stories, so that you never get to the other side. Trust is a huge component of your practice, and you need it. But what happens is, on the other side, when it happens to you, that trust goes away in volumes. Like you start not trusting yourself, you start not trusting, and it's hard. It's very hard. And then can you speak to the complexity of it? When this happens, it's not easy. You don't just open it up and do a simple audit trail. Like you have to dig. It's pretty complex, right, Stacey?
Well, it is, because you think, okay, well, there must have been adjustments. So that's how we can come through and we can just tag all adjustments and say, okay, we would investigate all of those cases. Well, in fact, even after we suspended her, my staff thought she was not suspended. I'm sorry. They thought that she just wasn't coming to work the next day because there was a family emergency. We weren't really talking about what was going on yet. And so, in fact, we have somebody that leaves the office with a cell phone every weekend. And so that our patients, if they were to call for emergency, they actually get somebody on the phone. And she was supposed to have the phone that weekend. And so I called my office manager and I said, why don't we just make sure that Brittany goes and grabs the phone? She said, that's fine. So Brittany goes to the office to grab the phone. Well, Sarah is at the office. She accessed the office. And so ends up that Brittany doesn't know Sarah is not supposed to be there. And we don't know what Sarah was doing on the computers that afternoon. And so, but we do know from that Monday after that she had contacted a patient, told her that she wasn't going to be at work on Monday over the weekend. And so if she wanted to get the work done with the discount she had promised her, so then there was a whole other element. She was promising discounts to patients and saying, you need to check out with me. If you want the discount, I'm the only one authorized to give you the discount. She said, if you want that discount, then why don't you bring the cash this weekend? She said, I'm sorry to do this. So she actually called the patient, collected $3,000 in cash.
Wow.
There's a whole other element. There's a cash element. So you're trying to figure out checks, and then now you have cash. And so then we were trying to figure out patients who usually pay with cash and what would happen with them. So then we find that out. So then there's the cash and then there's the checks. And then to be honest with you, we have credit cards that are saved. You can't see the credit card information if you were to look at the computer. But then I'm like, well, did she ever get a credit card and use the credit card for little purchases? I don't know that. That's a whole other element that I don't know yet, unfortunately. And so the thing is, as you start to dig, we thought, okay, we started finding some adjustments and some things, and we started calling patients and questioning and asking them to check their checks. And so ends up that there were some patients that went and checked their checks. She was like essentially banking on the fact that patients would not go back and look at their check in the computer and say, oh yeah, that was actually, endorsed and everything was right there. Because I don't go and check my checks. I don't go and look if I do write a check, I don't go and make sure. Now, I always write the check in the payee section. I don't let people stamp it. I've never done that. So this was her telling patients that she was going to have somebody stamp it, and she actually would write it to herself instead. So that was a huge target. And so we had this collection of information to then provide to our, to the investigators. So then the police have taken this on. There's an investigation. Well, what we were patiently waiting for is this subpoena for bank records. So here we have just enough information for them to do all that. And so that's what, it starts to kind of start down that rabbit hole. And unfortunately, in my office manager, I feel like it took her into a rabbit hole where I'm like, you have to stop at some point because you have a job to do. She was just panicked. She's like, how did this happen? I think it just made her get so, focused on it that I was like, you have to stop. Like there's a point where we just have to let somebody else take over, and then you be able to do your job.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, I have so many questions. And again, the whole title of this podcast is Best Practices. One thing that I know for sure is that you want to make everything standardized and up to snuff in your practice with best practices. I don't know if you guys did this, but we did key fobs years ago where everybody has a key fob, and now there's electronic records of, I never look at it, but everyone knows there are records when you come into the building and when you leave. And if anyone's ever terminated, we never ask for their key fob. We just deactivate it, type of a thing. I think it's a really smart thing to do. And then have a checks and balances for that. Also, too, we started doing this right after COVID, 2-factor authentication for everything. So I get a text when anybody's logging into anything that I hold, pretty, like whether it be a bank account, even my Facebook login is a 2-factor, which means I get a text saying someone's trying to get into something, and I know in software. So what were some of the things you're like, if you were to tell a dentist right now, hey, just across the board, here are some best practices. Should we finish the story first and then go into best practices?
That might be good.
All right, let's do that. I'm sorry. I love education, so I want to go any direction. So let's finish the story. What did you learn later?
Let's not forget that thought, because I agree with you, and especially on the access, believe me, there's like a list of things that,
right.
So we get this subpoena. That's the thing is then we're, constantly just kind of waiting and trying to figure out what we're doing here. I even called the Commonwealth's attorney, who's a friend, and I said, we're waiting for the subpoena. Is there any way to rush it? And he said, the investigator you're using, he said, we actually use her as the model for everything we do. She's usually the example for when we're training other people or other localities of what we do here. Anyway, so we had somebody really great kind of investigating for us, but it was like the patience factor of having to wait, because also she's out there. During this time, she's out there. We don't know. I mean, she's probably got another job. She's, doing other things. And so my thing is wanting to protect others. I mean, I'd kind of gotten in my ear. Maybe she was working somewhere. So I called them and I said, I just want to make sure. And the issue wasn't working there, but I'm like, I want to protect other people. Well, so ends up that we get the subpoena and they get her bank records. So let's say that we had taken to the investigator about $9,000 to $10,000 worth of what we knew. That was just checks. This was not including the cash that we had figured out. And so ends up that the investigator comes back to us with all the names on checks that were deposited with the amounts. And there was another $15,000 that we had no idea about. So those were another whole group of patients that we needed to call. And they were patients that, lined up. So now, and that was what they did, is they did from January forward, thinking that maybe we thought this started happening at the end of the winter, beginning of spring. Well, ends up that no, in fact, it was all the way back to January. So what they're doing now is we're waiting for the subpoena to just get records from the day that she started working here, which was right after COVID, actually. And she worked for a dental practice before me. And so we don't know, so the thing is that, again, it's waiting. Now she was charged. She was taken in, let out with no bond, which there's a whole explanation for that. And so it's a felony. I've been told by the Commonwealth's attorney that the chances of her getting that decrease is probably very little. And now it's just more of a, leading up to a possibility of either court or even no court. Sometimes I guess some of these things, when it's so cut and dry, possibly they could not have to go to court because it all gets settled. I'm still learning about all those things. We have an advocate. And so that's, at first I was like, I don't need an advocate. I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna call the investigator. Well, they're not always available. And so the advocate kind of holds your hand. And so, I thought, oh, we can get through this. No, having that advocate's been good to be able to call on, and being friendly with the Commonwealth's attorney has been good too. But so, and I will say, when they arrested her, it raised my worry a little bit. I did actually even call that's when I called the Commonwealth's attorney. I said, I wouldn't mind having, just police presence. I'm like, I didn't know she was going to do this. So I have no idea I don't know what she's capable of. And I just want to make sure I've done everything for my staff. And he agreed. We didn't have somebody in the office, but just kind of driving by a little bit more and more present that next week. So, but everything's been fine. So,
yeah.
But, still kind of waiting. And, once it gets to a certain amount, there's possibility of even an insurance, filing an insurance claim. And so, because this takes, I'm frustrated. I'm mad. I go through lots of emotions. This steals from my paycheck, but we make good money. We're dentists too, so but it steals from the bonuses for my staff. They get bonused, and so it stole from the collections because this was money not collected. So if we're up to $30,000, that's money that was stolen from my staff.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And go back to it's amazing. And frightening how many people are repeat offenders. So we've had David Harris on many times, and he's like, you'd be shocked by how many people do this multiple times. And he pointed to one of the sources of why that happens, and maybe you can speak to this, is that there's a little bit of shame and embarrassment when you're embezzled as a dentist. You're angry, obviously, but then you're like, okay, this is bad, and I'm in a small town. I just need this situation to go away. And so you try to deal with it privately and maybe not press charges, which only allows the person to be able to go somewhere else. And then David introduced this. He's like, it's kind of silly, though, in dentistry, we don't do background checks on somebody who holds the financial well-being of your practice. They also have the ability to write prescriptions. It's probably worth it to pay, I don't know, we do it here, but it's like $75 to do a background check to find if they have a criminal record. And I'm shocked by how many people actually have a criminal record. You're like, whoa. Can you speak to the credit record? Yes.
Right. So it's interesting that you say that, because I actually had the gift of somebody being able to do background checks for people starting to work at my practice when I was private. Now you have Heartland, they do all that. And that's the gift. Now the thing is if she did this for someone else and got away with it, who was very kind of old-fashioned dentistry, then this would have never come up. So now when you talk about pressing charges, when somebody was, that it came up that possibility, of her having the felony removed, I'm not like, I'm all for like people getting back on their feet, and I agree people can change, but when that even came up that her charges could be possibly not dropped but like lessened, I about lost it, because I'm like, this is a lot of money. This was very methodical. This is actually even the fact that when I first was going to suspend her, and I looked at her and I asked her, is there any reason why you think this would be happening? Why a suspension would be happening? There's maybe some adjustments that look funny. And she looked me dead in the eye. And I think nonverbal language is very loud. There was not one thing in her nonverbal language that made me think that she was telling me like not the truth. And so now I knew she was not telling me the truth, but what freaked me out even more was that she was so stoic about it and looked me in the eye and was so serious about like, I have no idea why this would be happening. That actually scares me even more. So I know this was probably not the first time. So when they were talking about her charges, kind of being dumbed down, if there could be a word for it, dumbed down, I'm like, no. I'm like, sorry, hell no. Like, that's not okay with me. I feel like just for me, my staff, like for all of us to kind of be like, we have just these strong Christian women in this practice, like that one of the ladies that helped me start the practice, who, again, she's been cycling through this anger stuff too. And she's like, just in this rage of like, she just needs to, and even patients that have been dealing with it, or like that were victims of it, they're like, she needs to be charged. She needs to actually go through and hit rock bottom through this to make some changes. Right. So so that is to be honest with you, I feel like I went for a while, and I hope I answered your question.
Oh, you did. I'll keep you on the rails here because I've got so many other questions. And so anything I want to talk about if there's anything else you found after, and then I also want to talk about what you're doing now, what you've learned at this point in your career, and the changes you've made, and how we can pass along some of that learning so other dentists are less likely. We can't always prevent it. It's pretty rampant in dentistry.
What
But
would
what
you?
lessons have you learned, or what adjustments
Well,
have you
so
made?
what else did I learn? Where everyone is a victim, whether you're in a single practice, solo practice, or whether you're it with Heartland DSO. So believe me, we're talking about this on a regular basis with my regional manager, district manager, you name it, of how to prevent this even in the big, because you would think that with them, with all their checks and balances, when you
Right.
talk about, being able to know who's on the computer all times, like literally, like they tell us like whatever you're going to do on the computer is free range, like whoever's up in like headquarters is seeing exactly what you're doing. So it's interesting to me, but there's like, again, it's a bigger picture. So you know that the fact that learning that this could happen to anyone, also learning that, as much as I have been able to step back from some of the office things, and when I had the practice on my own and I was doing all my own checks and balances, like ledger, deposit, you name it. Even and I've been able to just focus on the dentistry, which has been fantastic. Like it's been so freeing. But even in that, it made me learn that I gotta stick with the business side. There's a percentage that I still need to do that, so that my between myself, my office manager, and also us being able to ask questions, I can, when I had my practice just on my own, being able to, when I was looking at things, I would always go to someone in the front office or my office manager and question things, not because I necessarily had a question, but because I just wanted them to know I'm looking at everything. Well, so with Heartland, and I don't think it's, I think that they've done a fantastic job on multiple levels, but at the same time with Heartland, I just kind of handed that over to them and thought, okay, they're doing the checks and balances. Well, I still need to do the daily, weekly, monthly checks and balances. So, and be able to ask questions and just kind of be a little bit more involved. As much as I've never been a gross micromanager, again, asking the questions is, I feel like, what always kind of helped, keep people in line. And this, I think that it just gave me this moment of, okay, I need to still be involved in that so no one can feel that they could actually to be able to get away with that.
For sure.
So what we're doing now, or actually what I would do different, I would have, at some point made it so that each person walking in the building, yes, you have a key fob, but in our building, we do have an alarm. I just would have made sure each person had their own code. So I knew who was in, who was out. I agree with that. Again, we're not huge, even though I'm with Heartland, I still have a small practice. And so I didn't feel the need to do this major shift of, making it feel like this big, big entity. And so that to me was feeling like I may need to do that. Well, that's changed. Well, so then the other thing is, again, I agree with you on the computers, like everybody having a login. And even, when you're logging into Dentrix, you're on on your Dentrix site, you're logging in with your code. The problem is with that, there's still an issue with that because, sometimes I'm typing my notes on a computer in the back office, and sometimes I'm typing the notes in on my computer in my office. And maybe you get more strict with that. I don't know. So, you have a login, and we do know that Sarah's computer, like she sat at her computer most of the time. So like, and nobody else was really logged in there. So, but the thing is when you do kind of those checks and balances, that's where it can kind of get a little fuzzy or a little gray. And the other thing that looking back, I would have done differently is just, we had some new staff at the time. And I think what she did is she took advantage of the fact that they didn't know all the rules. And what she would do is if I wasn't around, or, that's when she would kind of on the sly say to a patient, I can give you a discount for cash if you want to bring that in. So she was we don't do discounts for cash. I know a lot of people do. It's like the thing. We just don't. And so ends up that she was kind of doing that on the side, but then these new girls, she was training them. So they thought, she's the one, and if you want to know anything about your account, this is the girl you go to. So she was like the leader up front. So in their mind, she was doing everything that she was supposed to do. So, and what we've done differently, one big thing is, what we found is that, yes, there were some adjustments. So, yes, those are things that are red flags for all offices. So if you're looking at your adjustments, that's great. The thing is it wasn't all adjustments, but if there are adjustments, those have to be signed off by me on like we have made this kind of slip of paper. I know people are trying to go paperless. There's still reason for paper. And I'm sure you could find something to do it on an iPad or phones, however you want to do it digitally, but anything has to be signed off. And so the other thing is because it was adjustments, but it wasn't all adjustments. It was also if somebody was changing a fee on a code. So let's say that I bring somebody in. There's a lot of people that come in for a limited exam, and I'm like, they're patient of record. They just wanted me to look at something. I'm like, take that $99 off, just make it zero. So if we do any of that, like taking that code and taking it from $99 to zero, or, if I am doing an MOD on a patient and I'm being an MODL, then I say, change it in the computer, but still keep it at the charge that the patient was being charged, that they thought that they were paying today. Fee for service. So that was that to me is important. I don't want them not to pay more and feel like they've been, bamboozled. So those instances, again, they can't change the code unless they have this sign off. Like there's kind of, again, between myself going to the front and my office manager seeing that I've signed off on it. That's where we see, where things are allowed, so to speak. And so, again, it's checks and balances. Now, this is where, Kirk and I were talking prior, what's the answer to the fact that what she was doing is, everything was right in the ledger. You check the ledger, and then, maybe 2 weeks later before the month end, she would just swipe the ledger of the patients as if they had never come in. And so that check was still sitting there waiting for her. So she didn't actually put it in the computer. She, was just kind of in this cloud. And so she would just take that ledger and just swipe it as, all the codes as if the patient never came in. And then she would just take the check and deposit it. So their account was zero, their balance was zero. And so that is one of those that when are you really looking at the ledger to make sure everything adds up 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now? I don't know what the answer is to that.
Right.
I will say I'm putting a little bit of, of pressure on software companies like Dentrix. Just like you were just saying that you get an email or a text or something whenever there's a red flag or somebody's entering your office. Why am I not getting a text, or I don't want a text for everything, but why aren't we getting just a diagram of all changes that were being made, and somebody saying, what, Dentrix to be able to throw out this, there's a red flag here. Your person, Sarah, on her account, she's made 15 changes in one person's account today. Like, why aren't they? I mean, we have these software companies that supposedly everything, is pretty, I think that they could change these things. I don't know if it's maybe a risk management on their sense, in the sense of if they're trying to say that they could, prevent embezzlement and then they don't. And I don't know if it's a risk for them. I have no idea, but I'm going to put a little pressure on these software companies. And to be honest with you, the one that can come up with something that would be there's red flags here to try to prevent it, I think that we should all be applauding them and possibly, buying into their, their service, because I think it'd be a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, this is such a complex issue. Again, the whole idea is, as we learn together as a community, best practices, just constantly employ best practices in your practice. This is not about a micromanaging thing. The world is more complex. And Stacey, you're fee for service, but it gets even more complex if you have insurance in there. You also put yourself at risk when insurance weirdness happens. And that's a whole nother episode. And so back to the original point, I think we always talk about systems, like having a system and a checklist for everything. And now you do need a system and checklist for how cash is handled, how it's managed, how it's adjusted in your practice. And if you can share that with your team, look, we're always building best practices here. We're going to up our game. And I think the other thing too, we talk about this line of path on the podcast is trust. Trust requires verification. I raise teenage daughters. You do too. I trust you 100%. I'm still going to audit what time you got home. I have Ring cameras all on my house. They're not for burglars. They're for teenagers. You know what I mean? So I think it's okay. It's okay.
A protected community. And I know if somebody's walking in my house or out of my house or that sort of thing. I agree with you.
For sure. And it's not about me micromanaging, or maybe it is, but it's just hey, it's all right there. Just trust you guys, but you got to be home at this time. No backpacks going downstairs that are unaudited. All those types of things. I'm getting off the rails here, but the point is when you're building a practice, just to put some type of checks and balance. And I don't think you can do enough education on this. And so, Stacey, I'm just grateful that you were willing to come on today and just at least talk about this. Now, I do have one last
therapy.
It's good therapy. Well, and that's my question: is that between stimulus and the response, give us an idea of the recovery period, because you were cruising along, having a great time. I got a great team. Trust is high. How long ago did it happen? How long between when this happened?
Well, found out June 30th.
Okay, so that's right, June 30th. And so
that's what took so long. So it wasn't until September that they got the subpoena and enough to get the information to then press charges to then arrest her. So that's a waiting time where you're and girls in my office are seeing her around and they're it's just weird, it's just weird. And let me add too, she had told her grandmother that it was only about that she was getting fired for $3,600. Her poor grandmother calls to say that she has $3,600 that she wants to pay so that she can get her job back or get, not be charged. And ended up that, they ended up having to hire a lawyer because we said, this is under investigation. We can't really talk about it. She's like, oh, it's under investigation. So then the lawyer calls. So it's interesting because she even had this whole lie she had told her family.
Right.
But so when it comes to the timing, so it was just that much time. And to be honest with you, I am, yes, I've gone through anger and that sort of thing. And I'm a problem solution. Now we're, figuring out solutions. I got my team here who has been amazing through it. We still have an empty spot in the sense of that's being filled actually the 1st of October. Next week. Yeah. I'm when is this happening? So, so we have somebody that's filled this spot and we are really excited about, and just the whole season coming up. So, God is amazing on how he kind of will set things up and then make the staff get closer because, this has obviously brought us all closer. How could this happen to us? And, so, the next season I look forward to, I just think it's, I just have to, I'm the type that in a weird way, and some people might not think this is great, I have to let things go. Cause I have 3 girls to take care of. I have a practice to take care of, let the investigators do their thing, let their, and we've got to just move on. Let's move forward and move on.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm so grateful you'd come on and just share this story so that people can learn from your story. Any last thoughts you have, Stacey, before we say goodbye to everybody else?
So again, I say the take home is just build a system like that, for that checks and balances. I think that the one thing that kind of gives me a little bit of security now is just that, people having to sign off on, all these things. Cause I have so much going on. If somebody said, did you authorize that adjustment back in May for this? I have no idea. I don't remember the conversation I had with the patient yesterday if somebody didn't actually type it in the computer. So, that gives me, I think, a little reassurance that, if there's any changes, if it wasn't, if it's not in the documents that I've signed off on it, then, it helps me. It gives me a little reassurance. It's, again, that whole checks and balances. So if there's anything that I could, say the take home, just put together maybe one other thing in your system that helps you kind of with a little reassurance that this isn't happening to you.
Amen. Amen. I would completely agree. So thank you so much for being on, Stacey. I appreciate you. Yeah, well, stick around while we say goodbye to everybody else. But thank you guys for listening to the Best Practices Show podcast. And again, the goal here is just to educate you on real stories from real people so that you can learn from them and create a better practice and a better life. And so we take a lot of show notes. So everything that Stacey and I discussed, if you want to go back and review, you can flip up to the show notes wherever you consume the podcast and it'll all be right there. So hope you guys enjoyed today. If you enjoyed today, please share it with your friends. Keep sending us suggestions for things you guys want to see. And until we see you guys next time, or you hear from us next time, keep watching or keep listening to the Best Practices Show. You guys enjoy your day.